Hello, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 3D Bootcamp. My name's Shelfe, and I hope you are ready for some blendering today. We'll be working with basic modeling, and then we're gonna, do some things from there. This is hosted by CADA Trumax, 3D VFX school for films, games, and movies. Well, films are movies, I guess, but series, commercials, everything pretty much. My name is Shelfe. I am a former student from CADA. I am also a lead Unreal artist at Copenhagen Rig, and I like to work with 3D, and I like to work with Blender. Blender is quite a nice software. In general, Blender is what we call a DCC, a digital content creator, which means it's a generalist software. So last week we were working inside ZBrush Core Mini, which is as you can guess, a mini version of ZBrush Core, or of ZBrush Core, which is then a mini version of ZBrush. Those are specialist sculpting softwares. Blender can sculpt just as well, not as fine as ZBrush can, not as fine as ZBrush Core Mini can, but they are still, Blender still can, but you wouldn't. Same way you wouldn't model, which is what we're going to be doing today, inside of ZBrush. So, also I'm a bit alone today. My assistant has gotten rather ill and is not available to assist me. So, can somebody tell me, do I have sound? Is my sound okay? Stuff like that, please. If there's anybody in the chat. Where's that? What's that? Oh, nope, not that one. So yeah. How is everybody doing? If anybody is joining me from around the world, please say hi and say, where are you from? And for some reason, it doesn't seem to have switched. There you go. That's switched. There you go. Yeah. All right. So, like I said, please tell me where all of you are from, and then we will get into blendering. There you go. Mouse is being a bit weird. Well, let's work with that. All right. So, yeah, sorry about that. There we go. Today, it's gonna be the day. No. Today we will be modeling a sword. I used to do a barrel when I was running Bootcamp, but I can hear from both, from the past streams that I've seen with Emily Cosgrove, that you guys have switched it up and started doing weapons instead. So today we will be modeling a greatsword, and not just any greatsword. I'm going to be, I'm going to be modeling Guts' greatsword. Oh, how lovely. Well, hello back to Tenerife. For those of you who do not know who Guts is, it's the main character of Berserk. And this is his greatsword. It is one of the main reasons why giant swords got super popular in Japanese media, both manga and anime. And it is a fun yet very simple with some interesting shapes here and there that we should be able to do in a day. So I think we should work with it as much as we can. So to begin with, this is Blender. Okay, I'm having issues here. I've been given a wireless mouse and it is not reacting. Let me just see if there is something that I can. Okay, I can't really do anything. Well, hopefully it's not going to become too much of a problem. All right, so this is Blender. This is Blender 1.3 or 3.1. I know there's a new version. Blender 4 is out, but there's a good rule of thumb in the industry, which is you do not switch up software versions mid-project, because you don't know what's changed. You don't know, even if you read the patch notes, you don't know how it will affect your project. As well as, let's check here. Nope. Okay, this mouse is driving me nuts. There. And let's check if we have screencast keys. Nope, we do not. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. So from Norway, is anybody familiar with Berserk and the whole mythos and story about that? Yeah, that should be it. Because it is a little bit dark and grim, but it's old at this point, and the creator of it died recently, I think last year. Alright, I'm very sorry. I need to go find a different mouse because this is not working out. It keeps stopping all the time. I literally cannot do anything. So just hold on for 3-4 minutes. I'll be right back. There you go. I'm back. Very quick. I got a new nice mouse that has a cable in it. Means it won't run out of battery or have transmission issues, whatever way possible. So, let us, it's a bit flickery. All right. Yeah. So, let us jump into Blender. So, when we start Blender, let's say, let's close that down. Blender. If you've opened up Blender before, you will be met by this, which is your, that's wrong. Wow. Everything's going right today, huh? There you go. Let's just move that up a little bit. Whoa, somebody's messed with the aspect ratio here. Sorry about this. It's not perfect, but it's gotta be done. I will likely also remove the overlay at some point, just so that you guys can see what's going on. But yeah, so if you opened Blender before, you will be met with the startup splash screen. The startup splash screen just shows you, you know, getting started, Blender website, stuff like that, and also file types, if depending on what you want to work with. Now, if you got the first or quick start screen, like it's the first time you open Blender, it's a fresh install, anything like that, then before you click away from it, do yourself a favor and find where it says spacebar function and turn that to search, because that will make your life a lot easier, especially as a beginner. There's no reason to have it on animate, truly no reason whatsoever, but the search function is a lot more usable, especially if you're a beginner, because it allows you to find functions by name instead of having to find a button or having it in some weird drop-down menu somewhere. So we'd rather not do that. And after that, you can just click OK, and you should be on the same screen that I am on right now. Here it says new file, and we will just pick the general one. Now, before I'm going to do anything else, if you hit space and you do not get a search option and you would like it, I'm just going to show you where to switch it in case you didn't set up your preferences like that. Go up into File. No, sorry. Go up into Edit and find the one called Preferences. It's this one. So Edit and Preferences, and then Input. No, Key Map. Wow. And here you can see spacebar action. This should be search, not play, not tools. This will just make your life a lot easier in the beginning, and also as you get more intermediate, it should be easier. Even if you're an animator, I would still recommend doing search instead of play, because the hotkey for play is just shift spacebar anyway, so it's not that far away. While if you want to do search, if I'm not remembering wrong, is F3. That's kind of far away on the keyboard, and then your hand's up there, and then yeah, you get out of it. So space for search just makes life easier, trust me. All right, so with that, we should be good and ready. So what we are going to start with today is, let me pull this up because I've also found a bit of reference image here. We're going to start by making the blade. So you can see it's this big chunk of metal, fairly straight, and then with a little bit of a curve at the bottom. So we're going to start by making that, and then we're going to make the I guess it's sort of like the tang, the one that goes into the handle, and then the handle, and the pommel. And we're going to make them as 3 separate objects and then combine them in the end. All right, Come on. There you go. Yeah. So, and I have two different reference images. I have one that is fan-made, which is this one. It's just showing the basic shape. And then I have this one, which is actually from the manga, with this is the vision of it. And the reason why I have two different ones is this guard is quite easy to make and is also something I wanted to make with you guys today. While the other one has some weird wrapped one that's not proper. So, yeah, there's a reason to the madness, but the other one has more interesting shape. All right, so to start with, basic navigation in Blender. We, in 3D space, and in Blender we have areas. Areas are workspaces that are divided into different functions. Now, by default, in our scene here, we have our 3D viewport. This is our 3D space, where we have the Y, the X, and the Z. The Z is up axis. And I think I can even turn that on if I wanted to. Yeah, whatever. So, yeah, the Z axis, and yeah. So by default, in 3D space, we, as the general file type, we get three objects. We get a light, a camera, and a cube. Now, we don't need any of these objects because you don't want to use that thing. Oh, yeah, that thing was way too big to be called a sword. Welcome back, B-Blaze. Yeah, so we don't need any of these three things. First of all, you don't want to work off of default objects because you don't know what history they have. You don't know what's come before them and stuff like that. As well as we don't need the camera and we don't need the light. So I can left click and drag a selection box over all of them and hit delete. This will just delete them. You can also press X and you'll get a little prompt if you know you're worried about deleting the wrong things. And of course, if we want them back, Control Z. The wonders of working with 3D. We have Control Z. Now, to start us off, we want a cube. If possible, you pretty much always want to start from a cube unless it's impossible or super impractical to start from anything else. So, we're going to add a cube to our scene. We're going to press Shift and A, and this will give us up our Add menu. And here we can see the one called Mesh. This will add a mesh or a 3D object into our 3D space, and we can find the one called Cube. And there you go, we got our cube back. This cube will be our blade, like the main body of the sword, right? And to make the blade, we need to be able to manipulate the parts of the cube. And to do that, we also need to be able to see the cube from different viewpoints. So, the three ways we look around inside Blender is orbiting, is by holding down middle mouse button. You can see we're orbiting around our center point, which right now is just the center of the world. And yeah, that lets us spin around. It's really nice if we want to look through around things, make sure the shape is good from different levels. We can hold down Shift and middle mouse button. And you can see I can pan back and forth from side to side. Last one we have is Control and middle mouse button. This will zoom you in and out very smoothly. Now, of course, you can do that on the scroll wheel, but that does it in steps. It does it in increments. I think it's a 5 by default. And that's a Windows thing, not a Blender thing. So, and this just does it smoothly. So if you want a bit more control, use the Control and middle mouse button. That's probably better. You actually do have one more, and I do think we'll be utilizing it a little bit today. And this is Alt, middle mouse button. And what this does is snaps you to orthographic view. Now, orthographic view is an interesting thing that doesn't really exist outside of 3D graphics or machine planning, which is a perspective that has no well, it's a way of looking at something without perspective. Um, which means if I duplicated this thing and took it up and then like zoomed in on this, you can see that these two things, like this is bigger than this because of perspective, it's closer, so on and so forth. But if you go into orthographic view, come on, you can see there is no difference. They have the same size because that's what orthographic view does. It allows us to view things without perspective. And that's actually really, really useful if you're working with references, or if you're working with ways that like it needs to be symmetrical on both sides and things like that. So yeah. Now, basic navigation done. Is there any more questions to that? Or do I need to go over them again? Because if not, then I'll go over the 3 most used tools in 3D. Pop, pop, pop. Yep. All right. I think we're good. If not, just write. I will remind you. Again, I'm alone on the stream today, so I will be looking at chat and making sure to answer all your questions. Yeah. All right. So the 3 most used tools we use inside 3D are our transformation tools. That means our movement, our rotation, and our scale. In Blender, these are called grab, rotation, and scale. And the reason why they're called that is because their hotkeys match up to their name. So if you want to grab something, you press G, and you can move it around 3D space. Cool, right? That's really cool. And if you don't like the way you've moved it, you can right-click to cancel. Now it will snap back to its original position. But we can also do something else. We can press G, and then an axis in 3D space to lock it to that axis. So I've pressed G and Z, and now you can see I can only move my cube on the Z axis. I can do the same thing with the Y axis and the X axis. Or if I want to do it on 2 axes, I'll do Shift Z, then I'm only moving on the X and the Y, Shift X, only on the Y and Z, Shift Y, only on the X and Y. This is really nice to be able to lock what you're doing so you're not moving things in weird directions unintentionally, because that happens to everybody, not just beginners, it's also experienced people and industry veterans. So, yeah. And then, of course, we have rotate. It rotates your cube. Rotate around the x-axis, rotate around the y-axis, rotate around the z-axis, rotate around the x and the y, which just looks like the z-axis. Rotate only around, yeah. It's not a lot of point to the x or to the rotation, but you know, the concept still holds. Last one we have is scale. Want to change the size of something? That's great. Uniformly, that's your regular one. Only on the y-axis. Perfect. Only on the x-axis. Oh, that's just great. Z-axis, even more perfect. And you know what? Let's start off by just scaling a little bit on the Z-axis here. Because we know we need a long blade like this, right? So we can scale a long blade. And then we know the blade is, like, it's thick for a sword. It's still, you know, anime, manga, giant sword, but it's big for a sword. And it still tends to be not cubic. It tends to be a little bit flatter on some of the sides. So let's do scale and x-axis. So S and X. And then scale it inward. Don't get the perfect scale now. We can always adjust it later, and we're going to do extra things to it before we get to that point. All right. And that's great. So this is going to be our base model. I'm just going to move mine up a little bit there. And what this means is, well, if this is our base, well, then we need to start manipulating parts of it to model. And the way we model things is move around vertices, edges, and faces. Now, we can't get a hold of them currently because Blender in 3D space works in modes. You can see that up here, object mode. If you click down this drop-down menu, you have a lot of different modes. Or, by default, because we're working with modeling, you can press Tab with your model selected, and you can actually get into 3D modeling mode, or edit mode. Now, first thing we got here are vertices. Vertices, or vertici, or vertex, I actually think vertices, vertex, whatever, is plural by default, are 3D location matrices. They are just a point in space with location data on it. It means you can move it around, but you cannot rotate or scale it because it doesn't have a scale, it doesn't have a rotation value, it's just a point in space. If you select two of them, you can actually rotate them because you're rotating the median point, the middle of them. And the same thing if you scale, you can scale them. And this is because when you have two of them, you can draw a vector between them or an edge. And if you want to get back to vertex mode, you press 1 on your keyboard. If you want to go to edge mode, you press 2. And if you want to be in the last one, well, let's finish with edges then. So edges are vectors. And I know that sounds silly to you guys if you know math, because vectors are supposed to, be bendy and stuff. But they are vectors because they are 2 points between two locations with an edge dot between them. And they can do all the things that two vertices can, and they're great for it. Now, if we have 3 or more edges, we can make what's called a face. Hotkey 3 on your keyboard. And faces are actually the visible parts of our 3D model. Like if you are rendering or if you transfer it into a game engine, things like that, the faces are the visible parts. The edges shouldn't be visible. If they are, something went wrong. And here we can start to manipulate. So these can do everything because they are 4 location matrices and 4 edges. Now there's an important thing here. When I said before, if you have 3 or more edges, you can do a face. So that also means you can do triangles, right? There is a lot of tutorials and how-tos going on online showing that you can use more than 4 sides on a face. Inside Blender, it's not a problem. As soon as you're getting out of Blender, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt. So, for the love of God, stick to quads or squares. And when I say a square, it means 4 vertices, or triangles. Triangles are fine. We like triangles. But we don't want anything more than that, because that's just going to make life complicated. Yeah. All right. So right now we can manipulate our object as much as we want, but we don't really have enough vertices or edges or faces to make the shapes that we want to make yet. So we got to start doing that. Now we are going to use a tool called Loop Cut, which will create a cut loop all around your object. It is right out here in the left-hand side on your tool menu. You can also, if you have the search function, you can search loop cut. There you go. And this is also why the search function is so usable for everybody. It gives you the hotkey so that when you've done this 10, 20, 50 times, you are you've seen this enough times to start getting, well, I should just do, let's go there, Let's Control R. You can just press Control R and you get the loop cut. Now, the reason why I go out here and I turn on loop cut is because it actually works a little bit different if you use the hotkey than when you turn on the tool, and I like the tool's functionality better than the hotkey's functionality. And that's personal preference. It's not a this is the right way of doing things or the wrong way of doing things. It's simply a personal preference. Well, I'm going to make a cut right here in the middle. And let me look at my reference. I think that should be good for now. So with that, I'm going to press W. This will get me back to my selection mode so I can select things. And I'm going to select the top here, just the top of the new loop cut we've made. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to press G and Z and move that upwards. So now you can see we're already getting that Dragon Slayer shape, because it is really just a slab of metal with a bit of a handle stuck into it. And at the bottom, we're going to grab the two outer edges here, and we want to move those a little bit out to the side because the sword has a taper outwards, right? So we want to make sure that this tapers outward, but we want to do it uniformly, because like I can press G and Y and you can see I'm moving this way, and that's not what we want. What we want to do is we want to press S and Y, because it's scaling from a median point. So if we scale inward, it's going to go inward like this. If we scale outward, it's going to go outward. And I don't think we want to go too far. Let's see it from a orthographic view. SY for scale. And there you go. I think I might actually take the top in a little bit, SY, just to make it a little bit thinner. There you go. That looks about right. All right. So we also know that we're going to have a little bit of a bulge at the bottom. So I can take this and I can move this down like so. Look at it. That looks about right. And this is a really good place to be, because look, we're still extremely low poly, and that's where you want to be. You want to be as low poly as possible for as long as possible, because that means you can work effectively. And it's very, very easy to go up in polygon amount, like how dense in edges and faces your object is. It's very difficult to start taking them away. So we want to make sure that we stay as low poly as possible for as long as possible. So all right, let us continue working. I'm going to press 3 to go into face mode so I can manipulate these faces. But here's the thing. I would like to be able to manipulate the back and the front at the same time. And before somebody yells, oh, you could just use the mirror functionality. Yes, but that also requires a lot of extra setup. And let's not do that. Let's do something quicker. When I select things with like select and drag or click and stuff like that, I cannot select the things behind them, because Blender does something called back face culling, which is if you're seeing the back of a face, you cannot select it. But we have a very nice workaround for this, and that is called X-ray mode. This makes your object semi-transparent, but also allows you to select through it, which is really, really nice. So that means I can now select the front and the back at the same time. I could also, if I wanted to select vertices, you can see I can select these through it, which I would not normally be able to do. So, Alt said, I'm going to press 3 to be in edge mode. And then if you're getting frustrated, like I cannot select the faces, these small dots here, those are the ones you want in your selection box. There you go. Because we have our basic shape, and everything from here is going to try as much as possible to follow that basic shape. And with that, I mean it's the edge of the sword is gonna be like the edge of the sword is going to have that basic shape, but also the flat part in the middle, or like the groove of it. So to make sure we have that groove in the middle, we can inset the faces. We do that by pressing I. Oh, I'm in the wrong browser. I, and here you can see I am insetting my faces. Now, if I look at my reference, I know that it doesn't look like this. It's not far off, but it doesn't look like this. So I do need to start manipulating these. And this is where we go in and we start proper modeling. Because now I'm going to select these two parts, the two top parts here. I'm going to select those two vertices and those two, because remember I'm doing back and front at the same time. I'm going to start by scaling them inward, because I know these need to be thinner. And then I'm going to move them upward, because this needs to follow the shape of the blade. It doesn't need to be smooth like it was down here. It needs to be up here and still have a semi-sharp transition from tip to whatever the main body of the blade is called. And at the bottom, we actually get a little bit more complicated, because with our reference, we know that most of this should and is covered by the semi-guard thingy that it has. So we can take these three and we can actually scale them in, or these 6, so that it looks like that, because the blade also gets thicker the closer to the base you get. Oop. And this is a really good example. That's probably will still work. Yeah. Base is a little bit too small. Yeah. So now all we really got to do is we also got to scale this in just to match up the size. That looks about right. If not, I don't care, because we're covering it up anyway. So, all right. How are we doing? I think we're doing quite well. So, now what we need to do is we need to create a little bit of a border here. Now this has two things. First of all, when the blade meets the middle part of the blade in Berserk, oh, that's probably not, that's an old render. There's actually like a little indent in it, so it goes in, and we want to try and make that. Now, there's also a different thing, and that is that these are no longer flat, and we would like them to be flat. So, first, let's flatten them out by selecting one side, not both, just one. I'm going to press S and X. So this allows me to straighten things out. Now you can see, if I get this one as close to the center of my selection as possible, it'll become pretty flat, but there's a quicker way of doing it. Press 0. There you go. It now has 0 scale in the x-axis, so that means that's flat. And you don't have to worry about getting it proper flat every time. And we will repeat this on the other side. Now the reason why we didn't want to do it with both at the same time is if you scaled those to 0, they would be right on top of each other and not give us a particularly pretty result. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press 2 to get into edge mode. I'm going to hold down Alt, and this will allow me to select loops. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to select the entire loop around our inset here on both sides. Boop. And I'm going to create what's called a bevel. Now, a bevel is taking an edge and splitting it into 2 and creating a median shaped face. It's going to look at the two sides coming out of it and say, or two edges coming out of it and going, what is the middle part of this? And that's actually exactly what we want for this case. It's going to create a nice little border for our middle part and then our edge. Because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our edge. Now, even for the ridiculousness of Guts' sword in Berserk, it does not have this edge. It has a sharp edge, right? So we have to start creating a sharp edge. And we'll do that by merging together both sides of the sword. So I'll select one vertex and the next vertex. I'll hit M and go at center. And now I need to go around and I need to do this for each part of it. I'm not doing the bottom because that we don't want to be sharp like that. I'm doing like the bottom corner here, but I'm not doing this part here. Yeah, I think that's fine. Because you can see this is sharp, this is blunt, and we want sharp. It's a sword after all, at center. And that becomes a very, very quick and very functional blade. If I go back into object mode, you can also see that now even without the vertices and stuff, because I had that bevel in there, this flat surface becomes a lot more visible on its own because it just has that little tone shift in shadow and lighting. And we'll get into that more next week when we're doing, are we doing texturing next week? I think we are. So, all right, I think that's good. I'm gonna press tab to get back into edit mode. Last thing I just want to quickly do is press Alt-Z, and I want to make sure that the bottom of my blade here is flat. So, like we flattened out the sides, we're gonna press S, Z, because Z is the up axis, it's 0. There you go. I don't too much mind these two. We can always fix that later if we want to, but right now I'm gonna let them stay. Now, that was fairly easy. That's the blade done. Now we need the connection part of the blade. Let me pick back in the reference image. Connection part of the blade here, and the handle, or haft or whatever, and the pommel, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a cylinder, we're going to chop it in half, and then we're going to use that cylinder to create the rest of the shape. Now I know I said before that you should always start from a cube because it's the best possible shape. It's wonderful. It's the greatest thing to ever have been invented. But sometimes it's quicker and less hassle to start from some other shape, like with a cylinder, because this is very clearly just a half cylinder, right? So we are going to create a half cylinder. So Shift and A and find cylinder. This will create a cylinder. Now before you left click or do anything, look down here on your left hand side. And let me just make sure you can see that. You can. You can see here I have a little option called Add Cylinder. Open that up and then find where it says Cap Fill Type. This one's set to Ngon. Ngon is anything with more than 4 sides or 4 vertices. So, we don't want an Ngon. Hello. We do not want Ngons. Nobody wants Ngons. And that was the PSA for today. And we're going to say triangle fan. We don't mind a triangle fan. We don't like an Ngon, but we don't mind a triangle fan. All right. Because this allows us to also bisect this, first of all, and use this much more efficiently. I'm going to start by rotating mine, so R on the y-axis, and then I'm going to type in 90, because that will rotate it 90 degrees. Super easy, very nice to work with, right? Then I'm going to scale it uniformly and make sure I'm looking at my reference image at this point, because it's very important to figure out where is this, because this needs to have or be aligned to our reference image. So if I look at that, it goes just outside the flat bar. It goes just out onto the blade. And we want to try to get that as much as possible. Am I going too fast, anybody? Do I need to slow down? Or are you all with me because you are super cool? There you go. All right. Yeah. All right. There you go. Okay, so about this shape, like I said, I looked at my reference image. Good speed, great. I looked at my reference image, and as I could see, this last little part here is just on top of the blade. So I want to make sure that I keep that there. I'm going to press tab so that I can see my cylinder. I'm going to press 3 to get into face mode. I'm going to select all the faces. Now, we already know we cannot select faces that are not, visible to the screen. So, we gotta go back into our front view, our X view, press Alt and Z, and then select all these faces. So now I'm selecting everything from here. All right, then I'm gonna press delete. It's gonna ask me, do I want to delete the vertices? Do I want to delete the edges? Blaze, if there's anything you need help with, please just tell me and I'll go over it again. Trust me. It's perfectly fine. So you can see I have a lot of different options when I press delete inside edit mode. And that's because it doesn't know what it is I want to delete. Now, in this case, I want to delete the faces, so that we have our half cylinder here. Now, I'm not completely done with the faces, because I need to fill in this so that it's not just an open gaping object. So I can select one face on each side, or one edge on each side here, this one, and press F. This will fill it in nicely. And yes, it is F for fill. There you go. And as we can see now, by bisecting that cylinder, it no longer fits up with the bottom. That's not a problem, because we can go back into object mode and we can start moving this around a little bit. We can even make it a little bit bigger, because I feel like that's gonna look a little bit better. Like, let's look at, yeah, that seems to be better. And I can now see that I do need to flatten out this whole part, because all these things are now bugging me that this is going up there that way. So select them, Shift or S and Z. There you go. See, that's a lot more Dragon Slayer to me. Boop. All right. So back to our half cylinder. We can scale that on our x-axis so it gets the correct size. Now, it's not a lot wider than the blade, so I think this should be about fine. If you're ever in doubt, look up your reference image, see if they have anything to share on that note. If it doesn't, see if you can have your reference image from multiple views, if there's anything that will show it off better. Try not to look at other people's work, because then you'll be making the same mistake as those people. While if you have like the the original artists, or if you're trying to recreate a historical thing, pictures of that original prop, it's going to be a lot easier to work with. Because they tend to be fairly consistent. I do actually need to make this just a little bit wider because we need to make room for a bevel. All right, so there you go. Yes, sir. All right, so let's go back to our, I have 16 windows on the other one. Let's go back to our reference image. The things we need to make here, right, is, well, we need to create this shape at the bottom, and we need to create, you know, this half arc inside of our handle. We need to create the little round thing here that is holding onto a chain. I do think we'll do that separately. And we need to create those two screws. Again, I think we will do that separately. So let's start off by looking at this. What would be the most obvious thing to do first? That would be this groove going along our object. Now, we already know the tools that we're going to use for this. Oh, again, didn't get the backside. So, gonna do like this. Hold down Shift if you want to add to your selection. There you go. It's gonna select the front and the back. Alt-Z to undo the see-throughness. And we're gonna use the inset. There you go. Because look, that's just giving us that shape super easily. Now, it gets a bit more difficult if you don't get the inset correct the first time, because you can see if I try to scale it, it doesn't look super correct. Let's see here. Yeah, we need a bit more on it than that, so I'm actually gonna delete the inset. Now, if you want to delete something but not delete everything around it, so I want to delete these edges, right? You can say dissolve edges instead. I'll just delete them but keep the general shape around it as much as possible. So I'm gonna go back to face mode, select all the faces I need, inset. I'm gonna do a little bit deeper in. There you go. I think that's good. That does look rather good. Am I mistaken in thinking the bottom here is not straight? It was not straight. So just straighten that out. Actually, you can move the bottom a little bit down probably. There you go. Now, this shape, well, now we have the general shape. We could select all the interfaces and inset them again, but why would you? When you can press Ctrl B and bevel them to get the same result. Now, here's a cool thing. Before you left click to confirm your bevel, press Ctrl B, you can actually add more subdivisions to a bevel. So add more edges in the middle of it. That's pretty damn neat, right? Because that means, oh, right clicked, so canceled it, that we can add the edges we now need to create the inner part of this whole thing as well. This whole archway. I'm gonna do like that. I'm gonna do a little bit more than I think would be anticipated, but I think that's fine. Fine. There you go. Because this part we can simply just scale. Yeah, we probably don't want to scale it on the y-axis, so let's press S, Shift, Y, and scale inward. And absolutely right, we don't want to scale on the y-axis. And the reason why we don't want to scale on the y-axis is, as you can see, it warps our entire shape in a weird direction. So no, don't want to do that. And if you want to give it a little bit more definition, go ahead, because we are going to bevel this again to make it round on the inside. You can see here. beveling it again. Because bevel works with averages, it can do smooth transitions between things. So we want to use it to generally create fairly smooth shapes or create harder shapes that have been tapered one way or another. There's also using bevel for support loops, which we will sort of start doing soon. But yeah, so I'm just going to press tab, see what that looks like. I think that's starting to look very much like the Dragon Slayer's blade. So now it's just to start, now we're actually going to start detailing this a bit more. And one of the things we need to do, so you can see I'm highlighting these edges here, is these edges need to be beveled. Because all the outside edges on our reference image, there you go, you can see especially here, they are beveled. This is, like, if you're thinking in terms of functionality, it's to shave off every gram of unnecessary weight. If you're thinking in terms of just pure aesthetics, it's to make things a little bit clearer. Because, yeah, we'll get into that later. So if I say bevel to this now, you can see we're getting these very, very round shapes. But that's because it remembers the settings from when I was doing the inner arch, and we don't necessarily want to remember the settings. So I'm just gonna undo them by scrolling on my scroll wheel. And here's the thing. Remember when I told you guys that we want to stick to triangles and squares? Well, the bevels I've just created have created 5-sided polygons or faces. This means we need to clean this part up. And this is sort of a thing, like, I know it's not fun to clean these things up. I am well aware. But please do it for your own sake. Just get into the habit of cleaning it up, because that is, like, it's the #1 rookie mistake I see. I also teach a class at Riseba Technical University in Riga, and this is the mistake I see all the time. Somebody has beveled and not cleaned it up. And it's super simple to clean it up. You select 2 vertices and you press J. Press J. And you just go around your model, just quickly doing this. Because it's only 4 places we need to do this, so yeah, 4 times, like what? 4 times 4 clicks. 1, 2, 3. There you go. It's nothing in the grand scheme of things, and it just makes sure that your model works correctly. The reason why we don't want triangles and we don't want or we want triangles and we want faces instead of n-gons and hexagons and whatever you can think of gons is because other softwares don't like it. 3D math is set up to be squares and triangles. It's kind of arbitrary, but that is the way it is, because it means, like, triangles and squares are the only 2 shapes that can tessellate into any other shape. And I know hexagons can sort of tessellate, but only on a flat plane. But squares and triangles can actually tessellate into a vast myriad of other shapes without needing any other type of shape. So it just makes the math easier. So, last thing we can do for a cleanup, and this is more because we want to shave off faces if we don't need them, is we can select all those center vertices here. That should be 8 vertices. Here, 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 and here. We can press X again. We can say dissolve vertices, because what we're left with is a triangle. And we like triangles. All right. And let's look at that. How does that look? I feel like the bevel at the bottom, correct me if I'm wrong, could use a bit of extra oomph. So let us take every face from here to here and scrunch in on our x-axis. Now, if you want to select faces like that, you hold down Control, and what that will do is it will select shortest path. Sometimes it does it a little bit, like if you do like that, it's going to do this because it's selecting the literal shortest path. But it is very, very nice to be able to select this whole area instead of having to drag a selection box over it. Just go click, Control, click. And now we can scale on our x-axis. And that gives us that little bit more of extreme bevel that the bottom has. I even think it can take a little bit extra. Maybe move it down a few. Go back out. Yeah, I think that looks about right. All right. So, next part about it is we wanted to add this little thingy here. Now we're going to do that with two different shapes because this is going to be a ball egg for everybody to model. Instead, we can just make fairly simple shapes and have them be those loops, right? So, still in edit mode because I want this whole thing to be one single part. I'm going to press Shift and A, and oh dear, I can add things to this still. How and what, and yeah, I hope you understand. It's lovely that to be able to add models inside models so that they become the same object, and that's sort of the important thing. Like a mesh is what you're seeing here. That's the 3D model, but you can have multiple meshes inside a model or inside an object, where in general terms, what you would define as a mesh is a closed piece of geometry, so a shape where there is no open faces, or even if there's open. But if you have multiple meshes inside one object, it just means they're not connected by geometry, by edges, vertices. Well, edges, vertices, and faces. So let's have a look at this, because that thing looks just very flat. It could actually just be a cylinder that's like extruded a little bit. So Shift A, cylinder, gonna scale that down. If I'm not mistaken, it's only on one side of the of the sword. So yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you guys what I did. So S for scale, G and X to move it out on the x-axis here, R and Y, and then I type in 9009 on my keyboard. This will rotate at 90 degrees. Now all I need to do is S and X and scale it flat like this. So I want one thing from this more though, and that is I want this edge loop to be a bit rounder. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to press Control B. You can see I can bevel it. But I said rounder, so that means I'm going to bevel it. I'm going to add some sections to it. There you go. That creates a very nice shape that we're looking for. Now I did it outside of our object. That's because I'm not done with it. So, depending on if you're working for games or for movies, right? There's certain limitations that you're thinking about. One of them is poly count. How many faces, how many polygons does your object have? For games, it's more important. For movies, it's less important. But there's a rule of thumb. That is, if you cannot see it, delete it. So we can take the back side of this and delete the faces. Now this becomes an open mesh. It's not a problem. We just don't want to deal with the back side of it. The next thing is we would like to select this whole thing. Oh no, oh, it's going to be difficult. Yes. Now I'm not trying to be taunting. I'm literally playing my own emotions before I've learned all these tricks to help myself and to help you guys. So, if we hover our mouse over our object and press L, this will select linked. And that just means we can select the entire object, boop, or we can select the other one. And we can now move this G and X into our sword and make sure that the placement is the correct one. Here we go. It looks like it'd be a little higher up than what I have here. Like here, probably. There you go. Yeah, that looks about right. All right. So, next thing is then we want to create the loop for the chain link that's in there to hook into. And we're going to do the chain link separately, don't worry. And that, again, we're going to use a different shape. We're going to press Shift and A. We're going to add a torus. Now, a torus is a donut. Yay, donut. Now, before we left click again, sort of like with the bevel thing, you can see down here, I have a little menu. These are the settings for the torus. And the reason why we want to edit these is, again, we don't want this to be unnecessarily high detailed, because we can always make it higher detailed later, but it's going to be hard to make it lower detailed. So I'm going to change the major segments. As you can see here, it's becoming less and more smooth. I'm going to change this one to 12, and the minor segments I'm going to change to 6. That's going to give us a hexagonal kind of donut, and that's the perfect thing to do. Next thing we can do is look at our reference image and say, that one's kind of chunky. So we can take our major radius and turn that down. In case you are having trouble seeing it, you can always turn on Alt-Z. And you can see what the major radius is doing is just making everything overall kind of bigger and smaller. The minor radius focuses more on the donut itself and less on the entire shape. Those two things are so this is the hole and everything around it. This is the geometry itself. So if I make the hole bigger, it kind of makes the geometry smaller because the geometry is trying to be the same size or like the same volume. While if I take the minor radius, I can change the volume of the geometry itself. Right? So I want a fairly small major radius and not super high, but like a little bit higher than standard torus size. I think 0.16 was where I thought it looked good. 0.18 is actually better. And there, Alt-Z, gonna move that out on the x-axis because I think this is a very nice shape for it to have. And then we can move it in. And I'm moving it in without locking it to an axis to be a little bit, to show you guys why it's important to lock to an axis. Because look here, it moved from there to over here, even though what I was trying to do is placing it in the middle there. That's because the 3D software doesn't know where in the depth you want to go. So it's kind of important to give it a little bit of help by locking yourself to different axes. And there you go. Now this one's going to turn, if we were thinking like it's going to be animated, this one's going to turn and all that, so I'm not going to remove the back faces of it. Alright. How much time do we have left? I'm going to leave the chain link until last because we do need to do the handle first. And let's get into that. So, handle is a cylinder that is like ridged. It becomes thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner, thicker, thicker, thinner, so on and so forth. All right. So we want mirror that effect on our model. So again, we got our blade, we got our pommel or guard. No, that would be a guard. Yeah. Here. And then we're gonna have our handle down here. So I'm gonna Shift A. I'm gonna create a cylinder. And I'm just gonna scale this cylinder in the X and the Y axis. So if you do not, if you need to refresh that I will select the cylinder, S, Shift Z to exclude the Z axis. And then I'm gonna make a handle. Now this handle's always gonna be looking too small for your sword. It just is. It's a part of the design. That's just what we have to live with. Now, did I remember? I did remember to turn it to triangle fan. Good. Then we're going to press Tab to go into edit mode with our cylinder selected. And we're going to create a loop cut. Boop. We're just going to create that one. Go back into our selection tool. Because what happens to a bevel if the edges you're beveling between are the same angle? Like, we've been using bevel in a way that's averaging out angles. Now we can bevel using the same angles, right? Well, we get more subdivisions in our surface that are evenly spaced out. Now, if you want yours more chaotic, you're welcome to do so. You can just go in, you can move them around a little bit. But I like this because this allows us to have some evenly spaced bevels here, 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 and here. By the way, if you're having trouble and it's like selecting the wrong loops by holding down Alt and clicking, where your mouse is the closest to is the loop and the loop direction it's going to go to. So there, and there, and there, and I guess we're doing a bottom one. Yeah, and let's do the top one here as well. Because we're going to bevel these as well. Because we want these to be, if you guys remember our reference image, we want these to be like the little folds, or I have seen like some blacksmithing channels do, like when they put the leather on, they'll wrap the leather on and then they'll put steel wire and do rings like that on it. Or they'll wrap the leather on as one big piece and then do steel wire to shape it or to decorate it. And it's just a different way of doing handles. It's not better or worse than anything else. It's just a way of doing handles. So yeah, gonna have all these selected. Control B, that is way too many segments. So we're gonna turn those down. And I think like only having one middle section is probably where you wanna be with this. Because again, this is the handle, so if you're making it for a computer game or you're making it for a movie, somebody's hand's gonna be on it most of the time. So we just select all of the center loops here, because that allows us to press S, Shift Z, and scale them inwards. And there you go. You have that ridged look to your handle. Now this looks very mechanic, very machined, or like if you have a lathe, you know, those spinny boys that woodworkers use to like carve out round stuff. If you think this looks too mechanical, too orderly, don't be afraid to go in Alt Z, select them, and then rotate them. Just be sure you don't, you know, rotate them too much that you're changing the shape of your cylinder too much. As you can see here, cylinder is going to become fairly round. Don't really want that. But if you just do it a little bit, that's going to create enough visual variation to still be interesting, while not ruining your basic shape. Like, that's already a lot better, looks a lot more chaotic, and generally speaking, quite nice. Oh, that's the wrong one. There you go. So that's our handle. Is it still too small? I think it's still a little bit too small, so let's just make it a little bit bigger. And the top one, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that is perfect. I think that that is a good size for it. It might be too big compared to what it is in the manga, but it looks better in 3D this way, so that's what I'm going to stick with. Now our last thing is the pommel. Normally on any other sword this is a counterweight. This allows you to swing more easily because you have some weight behind the way your hand naturally moves, like this, and it just generally makes it easier to work around with. It's also great for bashing people with, apparently. I have a friend who's doing both Mordhau and Hema, and apparently pommel bashes are one of the best things in the world, because everybody thinks you're going to slash somebody with a sword. He fights with a two-handed claymore. He's 2 meters and something. He's terrifying to see in his armor. So everybody thinks you're trying to do like a cleave, but instead, like, you just take an extra step forward and you bash them in the face with the pommel. Yeah, apparently it's great fun to catch people off guard that way. I just remembered something. So swords handles tend to be shaped. So if you want to get a little bit more accurate with this, press S and then X or Y, depending on where you're oriented, and just scale it in a little bit on that one. Just warp it that way. Because that's going to give you a bit more shape that's aligned with the blade. Oh, sorry. That you probably want. So yeah. Alright, last part. Oop. Shift and A. I'm going to add my cube again, because I love my cube. I'm going to place it where I want my pommel to be. Here we go. I'm going to scale it down to about the right size. Now this one's fairly easy to make, but you do need to think about which shapes go where, really. So I know the bottom is going to be bigger, but then it's going to be smaller after this, and that means I kind of want something to break this up before I start beveling it. And to do that, I'm going to use an extrude. And that is very simple. It is E. E for Edward. And I'm just going to scale that in. You can see already, that looks a lot like the pommel that we want to make. You can see, square cube with a flared base, extruded and thinned out. Now all we need to do is we need to bevel all of these edges. Right? Actually, this could probably move a little bit further down. Yeah. Now, we want to bevel these, and we kind of want to bevel them a bit much. Not by, we don't want extra segments in there, but we do actually want this bevel to define and change the shape of this cube quite a lot. This much. But that leaves us again with the issue that this is now a hexagon, and we don't like hexagons. No, no sir. But it's not too big of a problem, luckily. We can work around it. Just checking if this needs to actually be a bit smaller. I think it might need to be a bit smaller. Don't be afraid to go back and forth, by the way. There's a natural human instinct that tells us, oh, I'm done with this step, so I'm not going to go back to it. But it's a really good idea to just go back and forth, be a little bit more fluid in your work dynamic and in your work process, your work method, than being super rigid. So, yeah, if you need to tab out, go into object mode, and then go back into edit mode, please do. All right. Ooh. Hey, perfect. I did a mistake. Now, as some of you have probably tried, you've pressed shift and right clicked and you've moved this. This is your 3D cursor, and except in some small niche cases, it should be at your world center. Now the way you put it back is you press shift and S. You can see here, get a bunch of different options. You're just looking for cursor to world origin. It'll snap it back in there. And that's one of the things that always frustrates beginners. And I understand. It's super annoying. It frustrated me for a long time. But yeah. Now, like we did up here on the pommel, we're going to select two vertices. We're going to press J for join. Now, here's the cool part. This part is not cool if you only know Blender, because not like I don't. Maybe Cinema 4D can do it, but Maya definitely cannot create edges over other edges like this by joining. It will not create these vertices. It will either say, nope, can't do that, or create a complete face on top of the things you already have. So not in the same piece of geometry, it's just going to create a new piece. And yeah, it's annoying. It's a thing. It's a frustration of mine. So, gonna repeat the same steps at the top. Boop, boop, boop. There you go. Now, we could stop here and call it a day. But these things have kind of a little bit of a flat look sometimes. This is actually where I need to check my camera. There you go. Yeah, I need to, I'm just gonna stop capturing my video. So you won't be able to see me, and I'm gonna remove the overlay. The reason for this is we need this part over here. We need to be able to see that. You gotta be able to see what I'm doing. So, we want everything here to have sort of a unified look very quickly, but also create a more, like some shapes get more defined, stuff like that, but also smooth things out. So we can select everything, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click and say shade smooth. Now that's going to give us some weird results somewhere, and that's because it's now trying to shade between faces. So here, you probably saw this before. We were getting all these faces. They were being very rough with each other. Once we shade that smooth, it's like the geometry is not there to smooth, but it's being shaded smoothly. All right. And the same thing with our sword. It's of course creating problems here because it's trying to shade between this face and this face. Can't do that properly. This is beautiful. This works the way it should. This one is not as hard as it should be. So now we're going to attempt, and this is a little bit of experimentation on my side, to create a unified look. Over on your left-hand side here, you can see we have this area. Now before I was talking about we have areas. This is our outliner area, this is our 3D area, animation area, this is our properties area. We can find a little blue spanner, and the little blue spanner allows us to add modifiers. Now if you are in Blender 4, this drop-down menu has become very, very compact. What you're looking for is the generate option and then the bevel option. Boop. What this does is bevels every edge on your shape And as you can see, all my shapes have become very, very defined. The cool thing about this is if you just create a bevel, or if you create a bevel and you go, I think I want mine to be like a little bit tighter. I actually do think I want mine to be a little bit tighter, so 0.01 for mine, for my personal taste. Then you know this is the setting you need for every bevel, for everything to have the same look. So I'll add a bevel to the next part, the handle. Do the same thing, getting a little bit tighter shapes. We're still getting the bevels. Well, this thing is dangerously high poly, but you know, we're okay with that. Do the same thing for this part, bevel. It needs to be smaller than that. Doop. It's creating a little bit of an issue in there. Oh wait, is this still shaded? Yeah, creating a little bit of an issue in there because this becomes very dense geometry. So maybe that actually needs an even, oh, that's going up. Maybe that needs an even smaller one. Yeah, because I like how defined this edge becomes is really, really nice, but how defined this edge in here becomes is not great. So we can probably adjust that. It is just an adjustment thing. And we can do it to the blade as well. Bevel everything. Add a 0.1. You can also see that actually fixed our shading issues, as well as it gave us these lovely, lovely sharp edges at the tip. And there you go. We have our Dragon Slayer's sword. We got 5 minutes. Okay, so we got 5 minutes. Instead of doing the chain link, I think I should answer some questions. If you have any questions, I think I know most of the up-to-date data. If not, then you know I'll correct myself next week. So if you do have any questions, if you have anything at all that you'd like to ask about school, about 3D, about the industry, please fire away. Let me just capture myself again. Fire away and let me know. If the question is why is the webcam such poor quality, is because I couldn't find the lighting for the camera. This was just sort of what was already set up for me. I don't know where everything is. That's what my assistant normally does for me. Yeah. So I hope you all had fun. I hope you enjoyed doing this. When we are doing texturing, we will be texturing this sword. You are welcome to try and unwrap it yourself and then follow along. If not, I will be supplying you all with a 3D model that is unwrapped for the texturing. I'll make sure there's a WeTransfer link that we can use and that this can then be worked on next time. While you guys are writing your questions, I can just do the last few things here. So actually, this out here in the outliner is really great because it can show us that everything has, I like that. One of the greatest things, like you can do art purely on intuition, right? It's not wrong, it just does not allow you to teach, and it doesn't allow you to, it stops you from analyzing properly. So knowing why you do things and how, like why these steps are happening when we're doing them is actually fairly important, because without the understanding, we might get to the right point, but we don't know why. If we know why, we can do it more consistently. Like 3D artists are artists, but we are also production artists, which means we work on products, we work on an output. We tend to work on other people's ideas a lot, and then our own ideas in our free time. But more importantly, we are production artists, so we do need to be able to produce things consistently. You can have good days and you can have bad days, but if you fluctuate, like 40% in productivity. That's pretty good. I've worked with veterans who fluctuate more than that. So yeah, like understanding how things work just makes you more consistent in your art, and if you think about things, it makes it easier to work with it in the end. I wanted to rename things. So I have a bugbear about this. I don't like seeing people with cube 001, cylinder 001. So we should call things their actual name. So this, we can either double click up here on the name, is blade. This is pommel, or yeah, like you can select them in your viewport, press F2, and I can go pommel. This is, what's it called, haft handle. Haft. And this should probably be a guard, but it really isn't. So I will call it anchor, because like it anchors the blade to the handle. All right, and that's what we want to. Yeah. All right. So, again, any final questions? I know you guys are lagging a few seconds behind, but still, any final questions, come in with them, and I would love to answer them. If not, write goodbye in the chat, and I will see you guys next week. Remember to drop pictures of it in the Discord. I know we didn't go over your dragons from last week. We'll have to do that next week. The reason for that is I don't have access to the Discord. I am very much an external teacher at CADA right now. So I am not a part of the Discord. I could be a guest in there, but at the same time, I don't want to be the 30-year-old dude who's chatting to students in their Discord. I don't mind doing it if I was a teacher here, but I don't want to be an external person and do that. Yeah. Which is kind of weird. Like I've just had an intern out at Copenhagen Rig where like they're older than me. So yeah. Oh well. Anyway, I hope that you guys have had fun and that you'll be joining us again next week. Yeah. Yeah, again, ask us any questions. If you do have questions when I'm not here, just write on the Discord and tell Christian that Chelsea said that he should text me, and then you will then I will answer the questions through there. Yeah. So great, cool. Thank you for today. See you next week.